Hello everybody, congratulations on completing lesson 1 of the Discover the Aurora course. Jesse Beeman here again, just to sum up everything that we've learned, or the main points that we've learned in lesson 1. First of all, we had a look at the appearances of the aurora. Now the aurora, as we've seen, appears in 3 main different forms. It's not quite as straightforward as this because you can have different forms appearing at the same time and they can kind of be transitioning from one to the other. But just to give ourselves a good understanding of how the aurora appears, we can break it down into 3 different forms: arcs, bands and pillars. From a lower latitude, you'll see an arc typically as a fairly diffuse white-green rainbow-shaped structure stretching from the northwest to the northeast. Of course, if the aurora activity really picked up, then that arc could come forward and be more overhead. For example, from a higher latitude, your arc might look like this. It's fairly diffuse, there's a little bit of structure going on, and it's starting to look a little bit more like a band. You're seeing it breaking up into banding, but this is a nice example of a fairly diffuse, washed out arc of aurora visible overhead. So here, for example, we are looking east or west, east by the looks of things. If the activity picked up a little bit, you would see those arcs tighten up into bands, a flowing tight ribbon of aurora. There might be one or there might be several of these bands or ribbons rippling through the sky. And again, if activity picked up even more, we would see striation, we would see striated bands, and that means structure starting to appear in the bands. In this picture, for example, this NASA picture, we can start to see a little bit more structure, a bit of striation coming in, and even some pillars just starting to appear over there on the left. Speaking of pillars, these structures represent nice active aurora conditions, and viewed from a southerly location like Hilda Observatory here, we can see the pillars stretching up from the northern horizon, transitioning from that nice iconic green colour up into the red part of the spectrum. In a later lesson, we're going to have a look at why we get this different colour diversity, but for now, as you can see, there's pillars, or rays as they're sometimes called, viewed from a more southerly location. Go a bit further north and the aurora will appear higher overhead, and here we've got a nice example of some pillars starting to come into the bands, which are nice and striated. Now if we go further north and those pillars start to appear more overhead, we might start to see what's called a corona. In this picture we're not seeing a true corona, but I don't know if you can see that really active bit of aurora over the top of the mountain. This is in the Lofoten Islands. This is the village of O just here, and there's a nice crown or corona of aurora appearing over that mountain. But what we really call a corona is when a structure like that, when pillars and rays appear overhead. This, if you like, is sometimes referred to as the holy grail of aurora chasing, seeing bands and pillars overhead, bright, interconnected, concentrated columns of aurora weaving and dancing together, producing very psychedelic, colourful patterns in the sky directly overhead. So there's the 3 main kinds of aurora. A quick look at that. The aurora appears on the north and south poles in an area referred to as the auroral oval. Even during quiet conditions, over the Antarctic and Arctic circles will have usually some form of aurora. This represents quite quiet conditions, this cosmic bird's eye view of the North Pole, if you like, just there. And this represents more active conditions. You can see that auroral oval there has expanded and pushed further south. And if we have a look at the next slide, here we can say what's called the KP index, or the KP forecast. This is one of the forecasting tools which I'll introduce you to in a later lesson. But as you can see here, the higher the score, it starts at 3 just there and it goes up from 3 to 5 to 7 to 9 in red. The higher the score, the more possible it is to see the aurora from a southerly location like southern England in this case, for example. So there's a quick look at how the aurora appears and where it appears depending on the conditions. That's all for me. I'll see you at the end of lesson 2. Well done for completing lesson 1. See you later.